Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contrast. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
You set the table, put on a playlist, even made the lasagna from scratch. And now you're wearing it. OxyClean Max Force Spray tackles tough, set-in stains the first time. Adulting is hard. Fighting stains shouldn't be. OxyClean Max Force. It's not clean unless it's OxyClean.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. My guest today is George Mason University economist Bryan Caplan. Bryan's been on the show a bunch of time over the years because, well, he keeps on writing interesting stuff. When I think of Bryan, I think, he's sometimes wrong, but he's never boring. He's in fact, I think, probably my favorite provocateur, and I am thrilled to have him on the show once again to discuss his latest collection, Pro-Market and Pro-Business, Essays on Laissez-Faire. Bryan, welcome back.
Thanks a lot to have me back, Michael.
So I wanted to start with the title. There's a big and between pro-market and pro-business. And what that suggested to me, and I think intentionally, is that some people can be pro-market but not pro-business, which seems weird to me. So maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, well, actually, the reason I gave it that title is there are a lot of people say I'm a free market economist. I love markets, but do not mistake me for some stooge who actually likes business. Some of it is just like businesses are corrupt and in bed with the government, but a lot of it is just sort of like an idea of like actually, I don't trust business. I don't like them. I like markets because it just puts these incredible shackles on them so that they really have no choice but to go and do a good job. But other than that, they may even have distaste for business, which is kind of odd. Some of this, by the way, is actually specifically motivated by people who don't like Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand very famously talked about loving markets and business. So there's a lot of economists like, don't mistake me for one of those people, crazy people who sit around talking about business people being heroes. They're not heroes. They're just, at best, regular people like you and me, maybe actually even fishier than that. And it just so happens that market forces compel them to do good things, but not because they are good.
I guess I feel like I'm pro-market, but I always put in a condition. I am pro-competitive market, real competitive market. So I guess when it comes down to it, what I am is pro-competition, but I'm not really pro-business, at least if I stipulate big business, because I'm skeptical of big everything, whether it's big business or big government. And so I'm wondering, what do you think about the bigness component of all of this? Is that a meaningful distinction in your mind?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So as you know, when economists say perfect or say competition, they usually mean perfect competition, which is a model where you have a very large number of very small firms. Is that what you have in mind when you say competition too, or not?
Well, a certain number, at least I would say 4 or 5 reasonably sized. I don't have to be tiny little mom and pop places, but enough for, at least in my non-economist understanding, for there to actually be the benefits that one gets from real competition.
Right. So what do you think about Amazon? Well, here's a question. So what's the next best thing to Amazon? If Amazon doesn't work for you, what do you even do next?
Yeah, I guess there's Walmart, right? Amazon would say there's a lot of alternatives right now. We don't have the market corner.
So of course, there are a lot of alternatives, but what is remotely as good as Amazon?
Yeah, no,
for a wide range of purchases. Now, here's the key thing. Does Amazon act like they don't care about your opinion? Does Amazon act like they could take you or leave you?
Well, I mean, I guess
Amazon gives me fantastic treatment, almost unbelievably good treatment. Like when you have a return and they just, you don't like it? Great, here's all your money back. What else can we do for you? So that's a case where you think even a lot of economists, it's like, well, if there's just one firm, it's like, well, sometimes we see that just a single firm seems to act very competitively, even though you're kind of unclear about who their competitor is. If you think about it more, it's like, well, probably at Amazon, they're worried that if they don't do a really good job, then an alternative will arise. So they're worried about potential competition. And I say, yeah, that's actually really important. In the book that I'm writing right now, not the one that we're talking about, but part of what I do there is I just walk people through this firsthand experience. Is it really true that your experience in industries where you've got one firm is even worse than ones where you've got a lot of small firms? Like if you go into some small mom and pop store you never heard of, is it really true that you just have a strong expectation it's going to be better than Amazon or Costco or something? What about you? Like when you go into a small mom and pop store, do you have some incredible sense of, oh, this is going to be great because there's so many of these small firms?
Well, I guess I see your point. Is if we're looking solely at price, then maybe you have a point there.
How about just customer service?
Well, I guess
like some small mom and you went to some small independent record store versus at Costco. It's like, yeah, I have a lot more confidence in Costco that people will treat me like they value my business than at a lot of small stores anyway. And again, the point of this is not to say that small stores are always bad or anything, but realize that there's something really off with economists' worship of this model of perfect competition. And so, what I'll say is I see a big difference between something like a monopoly where they get your business whether you like it or not, so like the post office, right, versus a monopoly where they have achieved their position by just being better than everybody else. And that is a lot. And I say a lot of competition is the freedom to be better than everybody else to the point where nobody even wants to use the competition. You might remember there's this old thing from Orwell saying the problem with competition is somebody wins. I'm an incredible Orwell fan, and yet that is one of the dumbest things anybody has ever said about business and competition. It's like, well, this isn't even true for sports, George. Even in sports, the fact that you win the World Series once does not mean that you get to be the champion forever. If you really want to be a winner, you constantly are trying to stay ahead of not just actual competitors, but anyone potential. Right? And you're always looking for a way to go and further increase the gap between yourself and the competition because you know that they are trying to close that gap. So it's not even true for sports and totally not true for business where on top of everything else, often it's just so costly to go and keep expanding that there's these further checks on a business getting really big. But in the cases where a business can get really big despite these natural handicaps on bigness, then that's where I say, go Jeff Bezos. Thank you.
I want to focus on some of the specific essays in the book. There's one called Business People Earn Every Penny. And in that essay, like I said, my favorite provocateur, you always have great titles. There's this story. So your COVID vaccination T-shirt experience, which is weird in itself, but you use this story and you argue that most people don't appreciate how much folks in business actually have to overcome. And I guess that resonated with me a little bit because I'm a small business owner. You don't get much smaller in the politics guys, LLC, but my dad was a carpenter, owned his own small business. And so I sympathize, but I guess I'm wondering if that actually scales. In other words, I feel sympathetic for me and my dad and small business people, and you for trying to just sell some damn T-shirts. But I wonder if this really applies to these titans of industries who just, hire folks to do the boring grunt work stuff and they can focus on, rockets to Mars or something like that.
Yeah. So how often do people just hand people these great businesses where you can then go and try to go to Mars? So people will sometimes get worked up like Jeff Bezos. He came from an upper middle class family and they helped him get started. It's like, all right, that's normal for people who aren't even starting a business. If you're from an upper middle class family, we're paying for our son's apartments. All right. If they were running a business, then I guess we'd be helping them to get started with that. But yeah, the point of this is even running a very simple business is just a giant pain in the neck. And to get anything started is just very hard. There's all of the logistical details. And on top of it, something I didn't really have to deal with there is all of the regulations. So you probably know there's a whole bunch of regulations that kick in when you hit a certain number of employees. whether it's like 5, 10, 15, or 50 employees. So yeah, like in a lot of ways, people running larger businesses, they have a lot more problems. And, and then culminating, of course, in getting sued by people that you hired. It's like, look, without me, there would be no job, no nothing. And I'm getting sued by you because of what exactly? This is like, there is this old saying, if you don't like it here, you can quit. And without me, you wouldn't even have that option. So yes, running a big business, I mean, it's true that if you're the CEO, then you can outsource a lot of stuff. But still, like if someone offered me the chance to be a CEO of a major business and offered me millions of dollars, my main reaction would be like, well, how soon can I quit?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, if I do it for like 1 year and I get $10 million, then it's like, okay, so I mess up 1 year of my life, maybe have some really cool experiences, but also I'm almost sure we'll have a bunch of horrible experiences and just like a daily grind of not getting enough sleep and dealing with unpleasant people and unpleasant situations. But if I had to do that for decades, then it's just like, gee, like, what's the point of all this money? There's this old Onion article called CEO Retires to Have More Time to Spend with His Material Possessions. And I always related to that because it's like, yeah, if I were like some rich CEO, that's totally what I'd be thinking of is how can I go and start enjoying all this money?
Actually, that's exactly the response I had when earlier in my career, people suggested I go into academic administration.
It's like, yeah, if I wanted a job,
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
do entirely.
So you mentioned just a few minutes ago, you mentioned the CEO saying, hey, if you don't like it, go work somewhere else, which brings me to non-compete clauses, because sometimes you can't necessarily go work somewhere else. And I'm a fan of competition. And so as a general rule, I think non-compete clauses should not be such a good thing. Now, I do believe they have their place, but I feel like you go probably 3 further than that, actually, and make an argument that non-compete clauses can be, as you put it, a great way to foster competition, which seems really counterintuitive. So can you explain how that works?
Yeah. I mean, just to back up. So think about something like a patent, right? So is a patent competitive? And it's like, no, it says that no one can compete with someone who has the patent. It's like, yeah, but without the patent, there are definitely some industries like pharmaceuticals where it's hard to see why anyone would even try to go and create the drug in the first place. If as soon as you crack the code, people can go and just costlessly replicate your process, then why bother? And really, non-compete clauses are the same kind of thing where someone puts in a lot of work to figure out a way of doing something better than everybody else. And then to implement it, you need to hire some workers. And if in the process of being hired, they learn all your secrets and then they can just quit and use their secrets, what's the point? So that is the main story there, is that if you know that someone that you hire and share your secrets with can then just go and take them, then it is a reason not to hire, not to share. It's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, maybe only hire super trusted family members in order to go and work for it. And that means that it's really hard to scale larger ideas. So yeah, I say that non-compete clauses are really underrated. It's a contract or a conflict between short run and long run competitiveness. In the short run, sure, if you just burn all the patents or you burn all the non-compete agreements, then instantly there's a lot of competition. And whatever ideas were already created don't disappear just because you got rid of the protection. But what about in the long run? What about coming up with new ideas, new drugs, new methods of doing things? That's the issue.
But isn't there a reasonably large body of research that finds that non-competes tend to lead to lower levels of entrepreneurship? Because as I understand the logic is that if you're a potential founder, you're working at some established firm, you're prevented by the non-compete from going out on your own and doing your own thing, for competing, of course. I guess I'm wondering, where's the line here? In other words, maybe you would argue that, okay, for big multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar secrets to trade secrets, okay, non-competes make sense. But for somebody flipping burgers for minimum wage at some fast food joint, is there a line?
I mean, I would say that some of them, the best line is like, can you get people to sign the agreement? Right? If people don't, so like if the conditions are sufficiently onerous, then you're not going to be able to attract talent. You've got to go and strike a balance. So that's the right balance, I think, is can you actually still attract employees by offering them this package of money and conditions? The main practical factor that I think almost no one talks about is non-competes are actually really hard to enforce. enforcing it against a burger flipper, I know there are stories of that, but it's like, has anyone ever sued a burger flipper for violating non-compete? It's possible, but I'm very skeptical because suing people is extremely onerous. I think I mentioned this in another book, but it's the basic point of if someone says, oh, don't worry about anything going wrong in this contract because if something goes wrong, you can just sue them. And it's just like, well, thanks a lot. Oh, I just sued them. I just ruined 5 years of my life and burned God knows how much money to have some lottery ticket of getting money back from them if I could possibly even win. And then would they even pay me if I did win? Thanks a lot. So that's, I think, the real story is I think non-competes have these inherent limitations, not just can you get talented people to sign, but also would it really be worth pursuing? And could the person weasel their way out of it? So that's, I think, the much bigger issue. I think actually non-competes probably are very overrated. In terms of the research, I'm just going to be honest. That was a blog post. I didn't do a thorough literature search. But here's what I predict I would find. These studies they're talking about only look at the short run, which is the easy thing to study, of course. Look for our keys under the street light because it's brighter there, but that doesn't mean that the area under the street light is the whole world. I mean, you got the same thing with research on the minimum wage. So I'm a student of David Card, Nobel Prize winner. Has this famous study of the effect of the minimum wage on employment in fast food restaurants in New Jersey. But it's all based upon like a year. Like, is it possible that having a high minimum wage over the course of a decade will lead to a lot of automation, but not over the course of 1 year? And it's like, yeah. Like, why would you think anything else? I mean, just look at automation in the first world versus the third world. In the third world, it's standard to use humans for things that we use machines for. And like, why? Maybe because the labor cost is $1 an hour instead of $15 an hour. All right. So yeah, probably the wage matters enormously for employment, but maybe not in the very short run. And it's super misleading to only look at short run effects. Maybe the studies you're talking about are way better than I'm imagining, and I'm just totally wrong. It's possible. Like other people have put a lot more time into this, but I thought this essay was still a big improvement over what I was hearing from almost anyone else that would bother talking about it in a public policy context.
I want to stay on competition, but focus on antitrust because I'm a big fan of fairly vigorous antitrust enforcement because at least in my view, it's supposed to keep firms from colluding in ways that are harmful to consumers. And now I know that maybe the sticking point here is what do we mean by exactly? And so when you have markets where the product's free to the end user, right, a web browser, a social media app, but I think you would agree, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't, that a certain amount of antitrust law is a good thing, or maybe not. I don't know if you're going to say, hold my beer and say, no, none of it's good.
Yeah, I'm a full-blown antitrust abolitionist. Like, I'm not dogmatic enough to deny that in some cases it improved things, maybe even long run. But the slippery slope is really relevant here, and just the potential for abuse. So, like, do you know the actual wording of the U.S. antitrust laws?
Not off the top of my head.
So yeah, like I forget, like one of the main ones is like you're forbidden to do anything what's forbidden is attempted monopolization. All right, now think about that. Congress writes this law. What the hell does that mean? Like, we both speak English, Michael. All right, so McDonald's go and introduces a new McRib sandwich. Are they attempting to monopolize something when they do that?
I would say not, no.
But like, imagine you went in the meeting and they're like, this sandwich is so awesome. No one's going to be able to compete with this sandwich. It's so great. Like we will run the table on these guys. Right. And if you just think about like the kind of people in business, a lot of them, I think probably most are actually like sports fans. They think in terms of sports metaphors. We'll crush them. We'll destroy them. And here's the thing, like anytime you make your product better or cheaper, that's kind of an attempt to get control of the market. Like, there's the question of like, what is it operating in your mind? But still, it seems like, logically speaking, anytime you do anything good for your consumers, that is taking customers away from others. And if you were really good, if you really were just phenomenally better than everyone else, you get a monopoly. There is a famous Supreme Court case where they said, look, it's fine if monopoly is thrust upon you, but not if you actively tried to get it by being good. So I'd say that's the basic weirdness of the antitrust laws is it really is just a carte blanche to go and say, like, almost anything could be illegal. In practice is that. So it depends upon who's actually appointed the judges and what's going on. People, there was a period where there were some ridiculous cases, and then in the 80s and 90s, most economists felt like, all right, well, we got rid of a lot of this bad stuff. But even there, when you go into the actual enforcement of the law, there's at least a period. I'm not sure if it's still true, but there was a period when actually the single most common kind of lawsuit was a franchisee suing the franchisor. So it's basically you get a franchise from McDonald's, you don't like what's going on, and then you sue McDonald's. Here's the thing is, always think about what the legal process is, not even the letter of law, which but of course, often the letter of law is so vague, it's unclear what in the world it even means. Even now, it's at least the second most common category. It might still be the first, where basically you go to your convention of all the different franchises you could possibly get, you settle on McDonald's, and then after you're running the business, you get mad because McDonald's makes you buy McDonald's napkins from them at a high price. All right. And so you take them to court. And it's what a stupid system. It's did you not investigate what the conditions of the franchise were? Do you have some idea about why McDonald's might want to go and require you to go and buy their special McDonald's napkins? It's like they don't want someone messing up the reputation of McDonald's by having super crummy napkins or whatever. And they've got a bunch of other conditions. But then you get in front of a jury and you tell them your sob story about, I put every penny I had into this franchise and then the big bad McDonald's corporation. And just to realize that is at least one major use of these laws. And then it's why not? If they really are mistreating you, why not just sue them under breach of contract? And it's well, first of all, they didn't breach the contract. But second of all, treble damages, baby. If you can win an antitrust case, you get 3 times the money, whereas if you win a breach of contract, you only get the money. So that is one major kind of abuse. Now, of course, the other big one is suing your competitors. So let me put it this way. Do you think that it is a good kind of competition if your competitors can sue you?
I think it certainly isn't competitive per se, I would say, but yeah.
Does it sound like it could be super anti-competitive to be able to sue your competitors?
Yeah.
So that's actual antitrust law. And then, important to remember, most antitrust cases, vast majority actually, are private cases. The ones that get front page coverage are FTC, Department of Justice cases, where the government comes after you. And then even there, right? So we've lived through a bunch of these front page cases, right? All right. So 25 years ago, Microsoft gets sued. All right. And do you remember any details of that case, Michael?
It was something about the browser and I don't know. It was, it's all kind of hazy.
Yeah. So the government pursued this case for years. And one of the things that the government was negotiating for was that Microsoft should go and delete the pre-installed icon for Internet Explorer. It wasn't Edge back then. It was Internet Explorer. So basically their solution to the Microsoft monopoly was to say, if you want to have Microsoft Explorer, you need to be savvy enough to know how to go and put the icon onto your desktop, which in those days actually was a serious barrier. My parents wouldn't have known how to do that. And this is basically Google's just getting started. So the idea you just go to Google and find out how to do something was not really there. It was actually, I'll go to the actual manual, the physical book, and I will look up in the index, how do I get this icon on my desktop? And that was one of the government's demands to restore competition. It's just so your idea of competition is to first damage the product in a way that makes it very hard to use for normal people. There were other things. That was one notable front page demand. And then, do you remember how that case got settled, Michael? It's so ludicrous. All right. 9/11 was the key incident that settled the case. Because after 9/11, then George Bush said, well, look, at a time like this, America needs to come together. And we just want to settle this dispute among Americans. And we just want America to move on from this. So they cut Microsoft a deal. I don't even remember what the deal was. But that this would be the kind of illogic that leads to cases happening and not happening. It's so political in the worst sense of it, right? And so this is my general view of antitrust. The federal cases are highly politicized. It really comes down to who's on the government's good side, who's on the government's bad side. remember I was talking to a economist who was working for Clinton during this Microsoft case. And I was saying, this case is ridiculous. And he's like, well, Microsoft has been arrogant.
That's not illegal, you're saying.
My reaction was the right of a private business to be arrogant vis-a-vis the government is the hallmark of a free society, man. It's in authoritarian societies that businesses are sucking up to the government saying, oh, great one. So as to what was so arrogant, I don't know. But it's like, I hope they are arrogant. So I want arrogant businesses to just go and say, look, we are within the law, and so we'll keep doing whatever we feel like. And if you don't like it,
let's talk externalities.
Yeah, so bottom line, antitrust is, I think, just a super corrupt exercise in abuse of, like, if it ever is used well, like, no doubt it's a big thing. There's got to be some cases where it's used well, all things considered. But still, to put that kind of power into the hands of not only government, but more importantly, litigious people, right? And let me make one other fun point here. Is like, have you ever sued anyone, Michael?
I have not.
Yes. I routinely ask all my students, anyone here ever sued anyone? Anyone, your family ever sued anyone? Like, what kind of a human being sues someone in America?
Donald Trump.
They're psychos. People who sue other people are generally psychos. So to say we should create a right to sue is basically, let's put some new power in the hands of American psychos and see what they do with it.
Let's move on to externalities. I want to ask you this because I was surprised by what you wrote about that. At one point in the book, you write, firms have many creative remedies for externalities, but their response to both positive and negative externalities remains disappointing. Now, I'm someone of the left, I'll be at the center left, and disappointing to me seems to be putting it mildly, I would say. But can you kind of expand on what you meant by that, both by creative remedies and why you feel like the response has been disappointing?
Right. So just to back up, if businesses effectively solve a problem, then they usually stop thinking of it as a problem, but we should still give them credit for solving it. So think about this. Anyone running an apartment complex has to think about negative externalities because you put a bunch of people all living next to each other. People who have parties and noise and odors and who park inconsiderately and are just jerks to other people and go and jump into the swimming pool covered in mud and like everything else. All right. So anyone running an apartment complex has to be concerned about this. And yet we don't really think about apartment complexes being cesspools of negative externalities, do we? Why? Because the business running them have totally figured this out and have a bunch of rules and procedures to try to go and keep the problems down, starting obviously with who are we even going to rent to, right? And it's like, now there's some fair housing laws that limit this, although there's also the difficulty of enforcing a lot of rules that gets around the fair housing rules. So, like, someone shows up covered in tattoos. All right. So, in principle, they could probably sue you if you went and told them on tape, I won't rent to you because you're covered in tattoos. And statistically, people covered in tattoos are scary and are bad neighbors. But if you just say, wonderful, I thank you for your application, and then don't put the tattooed people into your apartment complex, you have then resolved a bunch of negative externality problems. Positive externalities, same thing. Right. So, like, it is standard for people running apartment complexes to have social events. Standard for them to just go and let's go and spruce things up. Let's make things nice so that people, and like, I don't think that I'm going to get individuals here to go and trim the trees, but I'll go and just do it. And then why do businesses do all of this nice stuff to go and solve these externalities problems, Michael?
Well, they want to make money, and that helps them attract customers. Sure.
So you can go and run a really horrible apartment complexes, and they exist, but the downside is you're charging low rent. Same thing. And on the other hand, if you want to go and make things really nice, then you get to charge high rent. All right. So that's one area where businesses are totally solving massive potential externalities problems, but we don't give them credit because it's just part of running the business. Same thing with every shopping mall. Same thing with every workplace. You put a bunch of people together and tell them to do their job, but in the process, there are some people who are horrible jerks, and there's some people who are sunshine. And when you're running a business, these are things that you need to think about when you are setting your personnel policies, setting your rules, doing hiring, doing firing. So this is another major area of life. Just imagine that there was no one who was running a business that actually cared about the experience of the people every day, right? Because, most of us actually, our main social experience is, in fact, our work environment. People's probably a full-time worker probably spends more time actually around coworkers than around their own family. It's least close, right? So if the person that is running your workplace doesn't care about externalities, positive and negative, then you are not going to have a good day. And these are all problems that businesses are taking care of, right? So those are some of them. So, those are like the really obvious ones businesses are taking care of, where they get no credit, almost no textbook mentions them, and yet they totally are doing it. And this is not just like two people bargaining over how often you mow your lawns. These are organizations that have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people, and businesses do take care of these. All the stuff that business is not so good at taking care of, things like air pollution. All right, so these are things where it's not just tens of thousands of people, it's millions or billions of people. So businesses are not so good at doing that, and I totally admit that's true, right? And similarly for positive externalities, businesses, you could go and just try to run your business to just improve the entire planet, but very unlikely to do that. You might very well have an advertising campaign saying you're doing that, just to go and tell you an anecdote that totally goes against everything I'm saying. So my wife has a friend who worked in PR, and basically her job was to publicize all the philanthropy of this mid-sized business. Her salary exceeded the total cost of all the philanthropy of the business. So it's one where it's just like, it seems like it's not really a lot of effective altruism going on here. It seems like you're spending like $1,000 to go and fund a local Little League team, and then spending $10,000 to talk about how great you are for funding a Little League team. Yeah, like it's the kind of thing where if you really understood it, it's more embarrassing than praiseworthy. But
a while back on the podcast, we did this sort of 6 months of Trump 2.0 segment. And I argued that one of the things that President Trump deserves credit for, it's not a phrase that I use very often, is he just dramatically limited unauthorized immigration from the southern border. And I wanted to
Michael.
I know, that's why I'm asking you this question, because I want your take on Trump's immigration policies. But I'll say, let me specify, both securing the border as well as the deportation effort for unauthorized folks already in the U.S.
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, in his first term, if Trump had been pro-immigration, then I would have said, yeah, he's a pig, but he's overall, like, it's not a bad job. Second term, he also added in the protectionism, which is so god-awful that it's like a second horrible thing about him. But anyway, so I do have a whole book, Open Borders. We probably even had a whole podcast on it, right? So my view is that immigration is a great thing, right? It is basically amounts to moving labor from places where it's less productive to where it's more productive. This is something that we should celebrate. And then there's really only the remaining question is just this. What if somebody breaks the law to do something good? Should we be upset about that? All right. Now, I don't think I did it in this book. I think I did it in my How Evil Are Politicians, but there's just the question of when is it morally okay or even praiseworthy to break the law? All right. So there's a bunch of views on this. So let's just work through them. View number one, it is always wrong to break the law no matter what. Okay. I actually recently met a philosopher who embraced this view. And I'm like, you're a philosophy professor? And he's like, and so specifically it was on the topic of immigration, where he was also in favor of immigration restrictions. And he's just started with, like, the law is the law. And I'm like, so like any law? He's like, any law. And I'm like, so you follow the speed limit all the time? And he's like, yes. And I'm just like, no way. Like, no one drives 55 all the time when it says 55. And it actually came down to, are you calling me a liar, Bryan? And I just said, look, yes, I'm calling you a liar. All right. But anyway, so there is the view that you should always follow the law no matter what. And I say, okay, that's a ridiculous view, Nazis, blah, blah, blah. All right. But then there's the next one. All right. You should always follow the law unless the consequences are terrible. It's like, all right, that's another view. And that's one where I'll say, okay, how about if there was a law that reduced your earnings by 80% for your entire life? Yeah, it seems terrible. Well, that's what U.S. immigration laws do to someone in Mexico. So, all right. So and then Mexico is actually a middle income country. And well, globally speaking, Mexico is fine. But nevertheless, if there's a law that reduces your earnings by 80%, then it's like, yeah, is it okay to break the law then? And so, yeah, sure. So that's why I think that illegal immigration is totally fine. I think that that these laws should not be enforced. Right. If they are enforced, I think that you should run and try to break the law to the best of your ability. If the enforcement is really horrible, then I'll say prudently, then don't. But not because it's wrong, but because it's too dangerous. Right. And then, finally, there's the view, what about it's okay to break any law that's just stupid? Right. And that honestly is the view that most Americans appear to have, because it's stupid that I can't drive 60 miles per hour in a 55 zone when there's no traffic. It's stupid. And it's like, is it destroying your life? No. Is it like, what's the actual cost of just following the law strictly? Like 10 minutes of time. All right. So you're going to follow the law? No. All right. So that's honestly my view. Yeah, the law's stupid, so it's okay to break it. Right. Now, the usual caricature of this. So anytime anyone thinks the law is stupid, it's okay to break it. Like, I didn't say that. I said if it is stupid, then it's okay to break it. Who decides? No one decides what's stupid. Things either are or are not stupid. And some people figure it out and some don't. And it's not. And that's just a fact of the world. You could just as well say, who decides whether a law is absolutely terrible? It's like, look, if you find some lunatic who says it's absolutely terrible that I can't drive at 200 miles an hour, then it's like, no, it has to be terrible. But I don't think that's actually much of a response.
Yeah, there's this other argument that you'll hear sometimes. It has nothing to do with economics. It's about the country and the people need borders and identity. And there's this great line in the book that you have. The idea that countries collectively belong to their citizens has a name, and that name is socialism. I thought that was a fantastic line, but I'm hoping you sort of expand on that. And also maybe, why do you think this is not an argument that seems very persuasive to, very anti-socialist MAGA folks?
Right. I guess to start with your last question, I think that most people are anti-intellectual. I think MAGAs are especially anti-intellectual. So the idea that you need to have some intellectually consistent view, and that if you go and say those horrible socialists that you need to scrutinize all of your thoughts and words and ideas to make sure that you are not accidentally sharing their premises is totally alien to most people. And so that's why it doesn't really hit. It doesn't really hit home, because the kind of person that would be a MAGA is not the kind of person who feels a strong need for intellectual consistency, pretty obviously. Not saying they are hardly unique in this. It's just normal for people to not care much about intellectual consistency and to be anti-intellectual, but I think they are especially egregious. Just to elaborate, the idea, the collective property of the citizens, and it's not your child, your life, your land, your business. This is a classic socialist trope. Right, it's an idea that goes back for a long time. If you go and read 19th century socialists, this is the kind of thing that makes them very angry. Oh, so it's your business, your life, your child, and the standard response is no. Society is you belong to society. You're a member of society. It's not just that you get to do what you want with your stuff, but what you think that you have, it's really just on loan from society. You're borrowing this stuff. This is especially strong in the case of who decides how children get raised, right? Because a standard view among socialists is, look, the child needs to be prepared to be a citizen of this country, and that means they need to get a public education from public school teachers teaching the approved government curriculum, right? And then the standard reply is, wait a second, like, what is this horrible idea? This is my child. I'm going to raise them the way that I think best. There's the famous Supreme Court case of Pierce versus Society Sisters, because the state of Oregon, I believe, banned all private schools, and then the Catholic schools sued and they won. Right. And that's why you cannot just go and ban private schools. This is a standard point among homeschoolers, I number among, and homeschoolers, I think these days are probably very pro-Trump, but it's like, well, so what would you think if the teachers union said that if you go and get to teach your own kids, you're going to teach them a bunch of bad stuff? And it's like, well, they're my kid. And, you're the bad stuff. I'm the good stuff. But again, this is a case where, who decides what's the bad stuff? Is it the parent or is it the government? So these are all classic socialist ideas. You can definitely see this with modern teachers unions going and saying, this is terrible to have homeschooling, maybe even bad to have private schooling because they can learn stuff that's contrary to what we think they should be learning. So that's the sense in which the idea that this country is a club that we all belong to and that really we're on club land, right? That is a truly socialist idea, right? And right, you're right, of course. Most people are fine. I believe this argument for certain purposes, but not others. The most ridiculously is there is a vocal contingent of libertarians who are really anti-immigration, and their story is, the land belongs to Americans, and so Americans should be able to decide how to use it. And it's do you realize that if you generalize this argument, you would have to abandon everything you believe, everything? Right? And they really say, look, you can't just go and move into my house without permission. Therefore, immigrants shouldn't be allowed to move to America without permission. All right. You can't open a church in my house without permission. Therefore, you should need to go to the U.S. government to open a church. You can't go and have a baby without my permission in my own house. Therefore, you should need to have a baby license from the government to have a baby. You can't open a business in my house without permission. So government should be able to license businesses and decide who can and can't operate a business. It is an idea which, if they actually took it seriously, it would destroy everything they believe. But as is often the case, they only apply it for the one thing where they're kind of come up with some ridiculous, bogus rationalization. And the real story is, I don't like immigrants, but it's kind of hard to have a libertarian rationale for that. No, property rights. And then just in terms of their own understanding of economics, so it's sure, business, in a free market, businesses can decide who they want to serve. And therefore, every mall is going to have a strict dress code. No, not true. Look at the world, man. Look, if you didn't know anything about actual businesses in America, you might be misled into thinking that malls would want to have strict dress codes in order to maintain the decorum of the mall. But that is not true, right? And I've never been in a mall that had a dress code. And again, what's going on is this is another case of businesses balancing the externalities and saying, well, look, on the one hand, probably there's some mall patrons who really don't want to go and see teenagers with wearing Marilyn Manson shirts or whatever. Now, whatever is the current version of Marilyn Manson, right? These days, it would be the parents in the Marilyn Manson shirts anyway. But on the other hand, there's also people that don't want to be hassled over their shirts, and the malls make a business decision of, we're only in the most egregious cases of nudity or something would we go and hassle someone over what they're wearing or not wearing. Which again just comes down to, even when businesses totally have the right to go and restrict entry, does not mean that they would in fact exercise it strictly. And I don't think that actually, even in terms of just description, what would, if the business owner running America, what would they do? It's they would run it like Emirates. They would have enormous levels of immigration. They would probably keep out a small share of just people that are a pain in the neck, but they would not want low immigration. They would not only want high-skilled immigration, because low-skilled people are awesome and you need them for your businesses. So if a business owner were running America, they would not say no low-skilled workers. They would say, you pick grapes, we like grapes.
Yeah. You've got a really interesting view on healthcare. At one point, one of the essays you write, this is great. In my ideal world, we wouldn't just abolish Obamacare. We'd abolish Medicare, Medicaid, regulation of health insurance, medical licensing, and the Food and Drug Administration. For starters. Oh, okay. Talk about a hold my beer moment. So what would you replace that with, and why do you think it would be better than what we currently have?
So it's just a free market where I've got some medical services. You want some medical services, I'll sell them to you. Of course, there's a lot of peripheral businesses like health insurance that are very likely to rise on top of that, but that's the basic idea. So the character of Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation, and he has the line of, remember back when it was, I have some apples and I would like to sell them. I would like to buy your apples. Here you go. Thank you. That's how everything should be. So that's not quite the inspiration for that chapter, but it's the spirit of it. In terms of what in the hell am I thinking? here is where like you really set this up for me to make it easy, because it's just like, how is it better than what we have, rather than why is it ideal? So right, I think it's much easier to argue that it's better than what we have than that it's ideal. But why is it better than what we have? The reason is that right now we spend an enormous amount of money on medical care that people barely appreciate, right? And this is something that people have a lot of trouble with, but it's just basic logic. The fact that something is really costly to provide is a reason not to provide it. It's not a decisive reason, but it's a reason to say this is going to cost $100,000. Is it really a good idea? We have a system set up to prevent people from even asking that question, from saying, like, what is the value to the patient of receiving this $100,000 product? And then say, well, it's only $5,000, so it's not a good idea, right? There's this old paper in economics called like the economic cost of Christmas. It comes down to this, like, does it really make sense to give someone $1,000 present that they appreciate at $50? And the answer, of course, is no. That is the definition of economic inefficiency. I mean, think about, with my students, it's like, imagine someone gives you opera tickets, season tickets, and you can't sell them. All right, this costs $3,000. All right, what do you think about this? And it's like, yeah, that was a stupid thing to do. You're going and putting this very valuable product in the hands of a person that doesn't appreciate it. And we've got very strong evidence that a large share of medical care comes under this heading. All right, so the actual willingness to pay for medical care for most people, if they didn't have it covered by government or insurance, is generally quite low. Not in every case, but it is very standardly so. Some of the glaring examples, end-of-life care. Right. So I was just reading a paper saying that with new lower estimates of end-of-life care, but still, this paper said the U.S. spends about 10% of all health spending on people in the last year of life. All right. So, and then it's like, like if you could have had that money to enjoy life and then just not had that care at the end, or only had palliative care where they just reduce your pain, but you don't get treatment, would you be interested in that deal? I'm interested in that deal. Yes. Right. So like I am fully on board team suicide when life is no longer worth living. Right. So if we have any younger listeners, like if you're 20 and you're sad, don't kill yourself. That terrible decision. No. But if you're 90 and in chronic pain, totally kill yourself. Get up the courage and kill yourself. And if you don't have if there's no assisted suicide, figure out a way to do it on your own. Right. So yes, this, by the way, is the one time I ever got my own university sending me threatening emails saying, like, this is contrary to our values. and I went over and told Robin Hanson about it. It was from our mental health center. So this guy did a survey on under what conditions is it okay to kill yourself. And like you could just give the answer of no, that would never. Right. And I went over there to Robin Hanson and he said, they got mad for that. He says, well, what's their view? That you should never kill yourself? And he was just completely dumbfounded that anyone would have. Was like, yes, Robin, that's the normal view. Anyway, so a lot of money gets spent on end of life care. A lot of money gets spent on people on like very expensive treatments for people who have so many other problems that it doesn't really improve their situation very much. So you may be that you were already bedridden and then they go and do hip or knee replacement. All right. And then the question is, so like how much actual improvement in your quality of life do you get from that, given that you have all these other problems? All right. So then there are a bunch of studies just estimating for medical services in general, how much would people pay out of their own pockets for them? And the general answer is way less than the government is spending on them. So that is my big case against Medicare, Medicaid is it's precisely the normal case with the reverse value judgment. Because the normal case basically says these programs are good because people no longer consider cost when they decide whether they should get medical treatment. And my response is they should totally consider cost because these are extremely costly treatments. And it is not a good idea to go and spend a pile of money to get a small gain. And what a good fiduciary agent does is to monitor this and to deny care to people who don't get high value. So another view that I have, I don't think I say it there, maybe I do actually, is if you're going to have socialized medicine, you should totally have death panels. You should totally have some organization saying there's only a 1 in 1,000 chance this saves your life, so the government won't pay for it, right? This, you might notice, is like a standard Republican argument for what's bad about socialized medicine is there could be death panels And my view is the opposite. Like, the death penalties make it less bad, because if government is paying for it, then it is the government's responsibility to consider cost and efficacy, and like also to consider how old is this person. And the problem with the system, the reason why a free market is much better is it does get people to consider cost. And that is a big improvement over what we have, where I think that a large share of medical products are just wasted. Right. And so furthermore, I think I also talk a bit about how there's been a number of experimental efforts to measure how much actual improvement in health do you get from subsidized healthcare. And this is not like some weird free market libertarian point. The mainstream answer is that it is hard to find measurable gains from at least expansions of government healthcare. So there are multiple studies of just the creation of Medicare and how much did it improve the health of the elderly. And these are quasi-experimental. They're really trying to go and look at right or before, after, how much causally difference does it make. There's also ones of the Oregon Medicaid experiment. There's another one from the Rand Corporation from the 70s. But anyway, spanning now 60 years worth of time. And standard answer is it's hard to detect the gain. So that means if you were doing like the death penalty logic, then it's like, it's really hard to see much of a benefit. The Oregon experiment was hilarious because it found the only gain in health from the people that got the heavily subsidized government health care was in perceived health care, self-assessed. So no objective measure improved. But here's the hilarious thing. The self-assessed health care, or self-assessed health status, improved when the program was announced, not when they started getting the health care. So if there's ever stronger evidence of just a pure placebo effect, if people now say, I feel better because I'm going to be getting health care, like I can't think of, if that doesn't convince you, what would? Right? And again, this is not done by anyone weird, not done by any of my buddies. This is done by like Amy Finkelstein at Harvard. And her only defense of this is, well, maybe we didn't have enough data points to really detect the effect. And it's like, all right, yeah, that's always possible, but like it's like you have greatly limited the magnitude of the plausible effect, and for all you know, it's actually negative, Amy.
What I've been thinking about, a lot of what you were saying in your answer to this keeps on coming up to me is the concept of opportunity costs, which I feel like is something that so many people so discount or don't even maybe realize. And I was thinking about doing a segment on like the most valuable but misunderstood economics concepts, and opportunity cost for me is right up there toward the top.
Yep. And it's usually the one we teach on day one. Day one, Econ 1, opportunity cost is probably the most common topic to cover.
But I guess I could hear somebody responding to this saying, okay, but healthcare is not, you're right about the overspending, especially end-of-life care and unnecessary care, but healthcare is not a good like other goods in the market. If I'm suffering, if I suddenly have a heart attack or I'm run over by someone in the street, I'm not going to stop and say, well, okay, what are the hospitals I could go to? And in some instances, I just simply have to take that service or else I'm going to literally die. And so in those ways, you can't treat healthcare like you can basketballs or concert tickets or some sort of optional service. Well, what's your thought thinking on that?
Yeah, so it's a very common argument. Almost everyone has thought of it, in fact, almost every adult, which is why any person with common sense will take care of the problem before it happens. So if you wait until you've been hit by a car to figure out your health care, then you're in big trouble. But long before government was involved, people thought about this. And, okay, well, maybe I could buy some kind of health insurance where I will have pre-negotiated the terms. And so I won't need to go and negotiate the price of the health care while I am getting picked up by the ambulance. And instead, I will do it when I'm in good condition. And if you think about this a bit more, you realize this applies to a vast range of products, right? If you waited until you were freezing to figure out where to live, it would be a problem. It's like it's negative 20 degrees in Madison, Wisconsin, and now I've got to go and buy a house. Right? And it's like, yes, so that would be a big problem if you tried to buy a house in the middle of the night in Madison, Wisconsin, and when it's negative 20 degrees, which is why virtually everybody there buys a house during normal daylight hours and the conditions are better. And of course, you could also rent, right? And same thing for food. It's like, well, like in the middle of the night and all the stores are closed. What am I supposed to do? I'm starving. It's like, well, maybe you could go and buy the food before you get hungry so that you don't have these problems, right? So this is not so different from a wide range of other issues, right? Or actually just to, step back, like this is, like a big one about relationships, right? It's like, so you want, like, I want to have a family. Well, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm all alone, and I mean, like, how do I even find a girl? It's like, yeah, well, you don't find a girl at 3 a.m. and start having a family with her. Like, you need to have a plan, and you carry out the stages of a plan. And it's like, all right, so first I got to figure out like who would be a good match with me? Like what's the basic thing of what I'm looking for? Now, how do I meet somebody like that? Now, how do I sift through all these possibilities? I don't want, what if I end up having kids with a woman who hates me? And it's like, all right, yeah, these would all be horrible problems if you waited to the last minute. Right? So don't. And also, of course, most people don't wait to the last minute. In fact, it's a real small share of people that just have no plan and live minute to minute. Now, you may say, yes, Bryan, but some do. I am painfully aware of human imprudence. I keep my eyes open in life. I really do. I'm someone who's just curious about other people. Like other people wonder, like, well, what do you care about what it's like to be that cashier? I want to know, like, what's going on in that person's life. I'm not going to ask him and embarrass him, whatever, but like, what is it like? Like when I was in Japan, I was asking people, so what's going on with the Japanese homeless? There's not many of them, but like, how does one become homeless in Japan? What's the story behind that? And so anyway, I am aware there are really imprudent people. Obviously, children are generally pretty imprudent. So it's like, what about them? It's like, well, their parents will take care of them. Right? Well, what if their parents suck too? It's like, yeah, well, this is not just the only case where that comes up, right? There are people whose parents won't even feed them. And then there is a series of answers that we have for that, none of which are all that satisfactory, obviously. But it's like, well, then like, what is the general answer, right? But one particular thing that I make fun of people for is, so you agree that kids aren't very prudent, right? Generally not. All right. 17-year-olds are all 17-year-olds prudent, right? All right. How about the day you turn 18? Do you suddenly have a giant transformation of personality? No. All right. So, and then furthermore, you realize there are some 12-year-olds who are more mature than most adults will ever be. Like my first two sons, like at 12, they could run things perfectly fine. I'd be nervous if they just had to take care of themselves, but I would be confident they could have done it. And on the other hand, there's people that are 50 that are just screw ups. And don't get me started on the elderly.
What it sounds like, Bryan, is that I'm trying to put it in blunt Bryan Caplan-esque sort of terms, is that a lot of these systems that we have essentially infantilize people, and we're not asking enough of them. So if we weigh the benefits of forcing people to make better choices and think for themselves, the benefits will be greater than the unfortunate folks who fall by the wayside and end up, in some cases, literally dying. And that's a trade-off we should be willing to make for the greater good.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you realize that if someone's very imprudent, helping them can hurt them, right? So if there's a prudent person cannot be harmed by help. If you go and give welfare to a prudent person, they won't then go and spend it on drugs and not get experience. They'll say, oh, well, it's still a good idea for me to go to school and get experience and get my life. And, thank you. This is going to be of some assistance to me. But an imprudent person, on the other hand, you can cause problems for them by giving them choices. And so that is another big part of understanding what's wrong with the welfare state is, for the prudent people, it's helpful, but they're probably going to be fine. And for the imprudent people, it's at least worth considering the possibility that you are hurting them by discouraging them from taking care of themselves and making better plans. And again, like, think about it. Well, if a person's a total, absolute, complete screw up, then like they'll just always make the bad choice no matter what you do. But there's this intermediate category of people who will make reasonable choices under pressure, but will make bad choices if they don't have pressure. That's probably the way a lot of people see their teenagers, right? Right. So they are not complete screw ups that I cannot help. They are not responsible adults. They're in this in-between status. And that's where most people getting government help also probably stand, is they're people that you should be nervous that by doing too much for them, you're actually going and messing them up.
Presumably you recognize, but you recognize the distinction between being imprudent and being, say, mentally ill or addicted, which are very different things, or can be.
Well, interestingly, actually, I've got a whole paper on this in the journal Rationality Society saying that those are different words for the same thing. So definitely addicted versus imprudent. Like if you see someone drinking all the time, yes, that's very imprudent. So like mental illness is a much bigger topic, but definitely like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You just go and read the symptoms of it. It almost sounds exactly like imprudence. And I'll say same for substance abuse disorder and a lot of other ones also. It's a huge topic. We could do a whole interview on that. But as an economist, one of the things I point out is that there is strong empirical evidence that people that you think of as addicts actually are highly responsive to incentives. So there's actual experiments where they go and they have people in treatment programs and either do or don't get money or other benefits based upon a urine test. And like people that we call addicts respond to those incentives. There's estimates of like elasticity of demand for heroin. How much does the price of heroin matter for consumption? So-called addicts reduce their consumption when the price is higher. Like this is observable. And then just more broadening the sample of evidence. So alcoholics may say, "Oh, I can't help it." It's like, that's interesting because when you think you're going to get divorced over this, you seem to improve your behavior. Or just how about changing the timing of your drinking so that you aren't being monitored by people that are angry at you? That sounds like a kind of decision making based upon incentives. So like I actually have a view that at least almost all of what people think of as mental illness or mental disorders or addiction is actually better. Is like basically these are words of excuse. This is medicalizing problems that people are well aware of for all of human history, right? And again, if like there's the old-fashioned word of lazy that almost no one likes to use anymore, right? But it's like, aren't there lazy people? And like, how lazy does a person have to get before they stop being lazy and start having mental illness?
Well,
right? It's like, why not just say that some people are really, really lazy and not use the language of mental illness, right? And going back to healthcare, there's actually so about the DSM. Yes, so it's Diagnostic Assisted Manual mental disorders. All right, so like why does it even exist? And the answer comes down to insurance companies. Right. So insurance companies want an official diagnosis so they can go and decide whether or not to reimburse and whether and like what treatments are appropriate. Right. And that's why there were fights, for example, of is homosexuality a mental illness? Right. And there's a great book on how it got delisted. Yeah. Do you know the story, Michael?
I do not.
So, was it because there was a lot of additional research in psychiatry and psychology and they discovered that it turns out it's not a disease?
That would be at least my hope.
Like, what would they even find that would count as evidence of that kind? Like, what would they have to discover?
I don't know, some sort of genetics or other sort of rehab. I don't know.
Right. So if you discover that Down syndrome is genetic, does Down syndrome stop being a disease?
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So it's the kind of thing like, what would they even have found? But anyway, the real story is that gay activists took over the American Psychiatric Association meetings and they ruined their meetings and then they changed their mind.
Huh. I hadn't heard that story.
Yes. And like it's so like this is in the early 70s, if I remember the date correctly. And it's one where it's just so obvious that it just comes down to this is socially disapproved behavior. And as long as they are disorganized and it's basically their family saying like what is to be done with my gay son, like how can he be cured, then it's a disease and then psychiatrists are making money off of it and probably I think getting reimbursed by insurance companies too. I'm not 100% on that. But then they get their meetings protested and we're not getting that much money from this anyway, so now it's not a disease. And I think that's basically what's going on with mental illness. I'm willing to admit certain exceptions, and I don't want to go and give a absolute blanket discussion. And there's some complexities, which is why I wrote a paper instead of just a blog post. But still, that is my view, Michael. Not popular, I know. And in fact, there's a lot of people saying this is like my very worst, most unforgivable position. But I'm standing my ground.
As always, I end our hour together with more questions than I started with.
That reminds me, Michael, actually, so since you mentioned opportunity cost, there was one other thing outside of the book that you wanted to talk about. Remember it?
If you have time, I would love to.
Sure. So when you brought up opportunity costs, so one of the main things that I do in my personal life is try to figure out a way to save time. And especially I want to save time that is not pleasant and doesn't make me much money, and then use the time for things that are pleasant and do make me money. So that's one of the things that I am paying a lot of attention to. And what I note in that piece is when I go on vacation, I start to realize, the system that I've worked out for avoiding drudgery doesn't work as nearly as well on vacation. It's just harder to keep it up, especially outside of the United States, because in the United States, in my family, we basically use disposable plates and cups and utensils for all meals.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
We just go to Costco, and for pennies a meal, we basically don't have to wash any dishes or anything, and we just throw everything away every time. But you go to other countries, and it's actually pretty hard to get any disposable stuff, actually. And the stuff that you get is, in many countries, just garbage. Like, you go and try to get disposable cutlery in Germany, it's wood, and it just breaks, and it's just like ridiculously low quality. So probably regulation, maybe it's just low demand, I don't know. But anyway, so this is a piece where I go and say, look, I'm saving hours every week by doing this. And even if you're even if you're making minimum wage, I think this is actually a good deal, because it costs a lot less than $20 a week to go to Costco and buy disposable stuff for everything and then throw it away after every meal. Right. And as I pointed out, it's actually even better than that, because if you have kids, you can start kids to have them set the table at a much younger age if it's all disposable, because it's lighter and it doesn't matter if they drop it. Right. So you can have 3 or 4 year olds going and setting the table with disposable stuff, whereas with regular stuff, then you might need to wait until they're like 7 or 8 before you're going to be comfortable doing it, because otherwise, like, I'm trying to save time with this kid and he's dropped a plate, and that's terrible. Right. So that's what I said there. And they said also, this is one that most Americans won't relate to, but in other countries, people flip out over it. And it's like, I also always use clothes dryers, because in Europe, clothes dryers are actually shockingly rare. And when you are in like an Airbnb, it's common to have a clothes washer, but not a dryer. And so, like, I was in Palermo in an apartment for 3 weeks without a dryer. And I said, like, that was hell. I was taking care of myself and my 3 sons. I think laundry, I was probably doing like 45 minutes of laundry per day just to keep ahead of things. And a lot of that was because you had to hand dry stuff on your balcony on this stupid drying rack. And like we didn't have enough space. And so, like, the effort to constantly cycle through and get things dried and like get out the new ones. And then if it didn't have enough sun, stuff would start mildewing. Right. So Americans, like, well, obviously, who would be so dumb as to not have a dryer? And the answer is, yeah, most of the planet, even people who can totally afford it. And so that's another thing that I do to save time. Right. And so, yes, there's people who get upset about this. And I would start in answer to people who worry about the sustainability, I would just start off by saying, look, even if we agree there's some notable harm to the planet, how big is it? Put a price tag on it. Give me a dollar value of the harm that my family is doing every week by using disposable stuff. It increases our amount of trash by like 5%. So, like, how much harm is that? Just give me a price tag. And then standard economist logic, all right, how about we go and we put a comparable tax on this disposable stuff and then stop moralizing it?
Well, I mean, I'd be okay with that. But my concern is more that we're not really pricing in those negative externalities.
Yes. Yeah, it's just a question of how, so it's all pricing negative externalities. Great idea. But a key part of that is the price tag. Is it a 1 penny externality, a $1 externality, $10 externality, $100 externality? Like, is it remotely plausible that one paper plate has a $100 negative externality? Yeah, I mean, just think about, like, if you listen to me, how much more trash would you produce per week? 5%? Right? And like, how much harm do you think that your trash is doing to the world? Like, so, like, and like, if you really believe this, then shouldn't we be charging people like $50 for every can of trash? You really believe this stuff? And, it's not that bad. Come on. So, right, yeah, I agree that it's not that bad, which means that increasing your trash by 10% is also not that bad. Right. Yeah. So, and again, my view is that, like, if there's any problem, it's just caused by governments going and generally running trash collection and then having the system where they just give you free trash collection. Although, honestly, in the modern world, it's flipped around. And now a lot of people live in places where the government is already making it very hard for you to just throw out trash at any price. So like in California, they basically give you your one trash can and it's now fairly small. And if you've got 6 people in your family, you just better figure out a way to just get all that trash into that one trash can. You don't get extra trash cans for having more people. And then it's like, okay, your taxes pay for the trash pickup. And no, you greedy jerk, you can't get another trash can by paying extra money. No, evil. Yeah, so I think we're already way past the point of reasonable management of trash and actually a good system where like it would be much easier to throw stuff away than it is. And it's like, where will it all go? This is where I have my favorite geometry problem, which is what is the volume of a cube that is 100 feet on each side of the cube?
Boy, you're asking the wrong guy, Brian.
Can you do that in your head, Michael?
It's the sure volume cannot. Of the cube.
So it's 100 times 100, which is 10,000, times 100, which is 1,000,000. Yeah, a 100-foot cube has 1,000,000 cubic feet inside of it, which means that we really don't need to worry about running out of landfills ever because the volume is just unbelievably large. Just digging holes in the desert and filling it with trash could just go on for an unimaginably large amount of time. So yeah, like we don't need to worry about it. Yeah, I see. Shouldn't dig the whole Manhattan. That's why you put it on a trash barge and move it to some place where people aren't living.
Well, of course, that doesn't address I noticed on the website when I read the article, a number of the responses were, but Brian's not considering the aesthetic value of that. And I think it's a fair critique because even though you can't necessarily put a price tag, there were some folks who read that and said, I like dining on fine china with silverware and not feeling like a 6-year-old at camp or something like that.
So I did actually address those people in the piece. So it's not fair look, maybe I'm wrong, but I did address them. And I said, look, how often if you are a person that goes and uses the china, how many meals do you honestly get it and just go like, oh, it's so nice to be eating on this china? I just don't believe like it's sort of like the guy who says he never goes over 55 miles per hour. Like I just don't notice people who do it the hard way savoring the experience. I just don't. I think that this is a very strong case of what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. They've gotten used to doing this way to the point where they have no additional appreciation from it. And I think if they actually would just give it a try, they would hedonically adapt to the other way, and they would just stop thinking about it as something that's even happening. I can believe that at a wedding or another special event where people are highly mindful to these special decorative details, that then it's worth doing. And yeah, like at my kids' weddings, it's all out. We're going to have a fantastic Italian or Indian wedding, like whatever people knows the best. Like I'm not sure which of the two countries has the best weddings. There's a contest between the two of them. I don't care what our actual ethnicity is. I want to do one of those. But yeah, like let's go all out. Great aesthetics, because that's where people are paying attention and do appreciate. But in daily life, it's lunch, you're eating a hot dog, and like you're going to tell me that you really just love having this plate. It's like if I sit with you and I just see you smiling at the plate, then fine, I'm wrong for you. But otherwise, I'm saying, look, you're just not being very reflective about your experience. And so that is my answer, right? And this is also like people talk about, I love granite countertop. Like I have never seen a granite countertop owner like staring at it longingly and just like, I love you. So great. So yeah, I own it because my wife wanted it, but I have like I was saying, I like looking at people. I like if I see smiles on their faces when they're consuming the good, that's where I'll say, all right, different strokes for different folks. But I'll see people savoring food that I actually find disgusting. And that's where I'll say, look, they like it. I don't, clearly. But that is not how it looks when people are eating off of ceramic plates. There, it's just like the food they appreciate often. But the plate, I just no. And what I'll say is, look, imagine there's a 5% chance I'm right. Isn't it worth experimenting for 1 month to find out and just try it my way and see if I'm right? And if I'm wrong, go back to doing the regular thing. And if I'm right, I've saved you thousands of hours of your life.
Well, I'll say this: if any listeners want to try this out and report back in a month, I would love to have you back. I maybe bring you on along with Bryan the next time he's on with that.
So, Michael, do you think you could talk your wife into trying this as an experiment for a month?
Oh, I'm pretty sure I couldn't, but I got to say, it did give me a different way to think about it.
Or even a week. Would she try it for a day?
It would be an interesting conversation. I'd have to save it for a very special time. How about that? I'll say that.
Michael. All right.
On that note,
Right.
I think we'll end. As always, it's been a lot of fun. And again, the book, the most recent collection is Pro Market and Pro Business, Essays on Laissez-Faire. As always, I will have a link in the show notes. Definitely check it out and Brian's other stuff.
You can get the book on Amazon, still $12. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if I finally raised the price after all these years of inflation.
I thought it was $12 or $12.99 or something. I don't know,
Yes,
but
yes.
something like that.
Yes, but in any case, it's dirt cheap. And either way, can you if you wind up trying any particular idea that I offer, you've already paid for the price 1,000 times over. So
it's great because you can read the book to get different perspectives. You can read it if you're libertarian minded, but you're also great for hate reading. I'm sure of it, So and you cover all the ground there. So anyway,
I hope not, but I'll take it. I guess paid hate readers.
there you go. Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, don't turn up your nose at paid hate readers,
Right.
Brian. Come on. All right. Well, with that, again, thanks so much, Brian. It has been a pleasure. Thanks for listening to this Politics Guys interview. If you want to get in touch with us for any reason, you can do that in a bunch of ways. There's email at politicsguys.com, as well as Facebook or X. Links for those are in the show notes. There's also our Discord discussion forums for supporters, which I am on all the time, probably too much. No. But anyway, if you're not already a supporter, I hope you'll consider becoming one. When you become a supporter, you not only help us continue the work that we're doing, but you get ad-free versions of everything we release, as well as the full-length midweek episode, as opposed to just that 15 or so minute preview. And if you'd like to get that full-length midweek episode, but you're not in a position to financially support us right now, not a problem. Send me an email, mike@politicsguys.com, and I will get that set up for you. And whether you're a supporter or not, it really does help us out if you subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever podcast app you use, as well as sharing episodes on social media. And finally, a very special thanks to our executive producers, Wilma Moreno, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, Derek Schmidt, Dakota Heath, Jason Chrysler, Dave Dean, Jeremy Larson, and Brian Matza.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,